Okay, we just looked at StarFigures, and we're gonna take that same program and modify it to eliminate a little more redundancy. So StarFigures, we draw top, then we draw an empty print line, and we draw middle, another empty print line, draw bottom. And draw top, there's no redundancy. Draw middle, there's no redundancy. Draw bottom, there's no redundancy, meaning there's no repeated code in those. But when we look at the sub functions, draw two lines and draw three stars. So draw two lines has the same line of code repeated twice. Draw three stars has the same line of code repeated 3 times. Draw X also has a line of repeated code, but there's something in between them. So it's to save yourself on the redundancy there, you would need a function that prints the 2 stars, and then you would print 1 star. Then you would have to call that function that prints 2 stars again, and we already are doing that with these print statements. There's a function that prints 2 stars, then a function that prints 1 star, then a function that prints 2 stars. So if the only thing the function is doing is printing 1 line, then we don't need a function, or we don't need to eliminate that redundancy. But here we have this draw 2 lines, and that's redundant. So I'm going to introduce using a loop here instead. It's actually in chapter 2, but it doesn't hurt to kind of try the coding here, and then when we get to it in chapter 2, it'll make our lives easier. So we're going to put in here, oh, actually, I don't want to change this. I want to create a new class. New class, and I want to call it StarFigures2. And I don't need anything in it, so I'm not going to public static void it. I'm just going to finish it just like that, nothing in it, because I want to go into StarFigures, which I have open right here. So now I can click between these 2 bits of code, and I want to come into StarFigures and copy everything except the class header. Everything up to there. So I didn't include the bottom brace, and I didn't include the class header. And then I'll go into StarFigures2 and just paste all that in. So it's really just the same code, just copy and paste it in with a different name. And I'll go up here and put my comment, my block commenting in, / enter. Again, my name or your name, our class, the date. I'm busy today. I'm so glad to actually do some coding and do some actual instruction. There's so much work on the front end of this class to sort of set everything up and get everything going. This is much more up my alley to like teach. Okay. Teach the content rather than developing the structure, is what I'm saying. Okay, so we're doing StarFigures2. What's different is we're going to use, in addition to, how is it different than StarFigures? Modifies, so this method modifies StarFigures to utilize definite loops decrease redundancy. Okay. So where is that going to happen? It's going to happen in draw 2 lines. So I'm going to come in here. I'm going to do our first loop. And so the structure is a little bit different than what we had in Python. We're going to say for open parenthesis to tell it what kind of variable it is, and it's going to be an integer. We're going to call it I, and then we'll do comma, semicolon. I is going to start at 1. I is going to go less than or equal to, so we'll go for integer I, start at 0 equals 0. I usually want to put spaces in between my operations and assignments, so between plus, minus, division, equal signs. I less than or equal to 1. And we'll go I++. So that's sort of the new, what do we call it? Syntax for an integer I starting at 0, less than or equal to 1. So it's going to run when I is 0. It's going to run when I is 1. It's going to run twice. We could just as easily said from I equals 1 to 2. And then this is going to tell it to increase each time it runs through. And we'll go through that in chapter 2 in a little more detail. But I just want to sort of add this. So I'm going to cut this line of code out, paste it in there. Notice the indentation. So the loop is contained. We have the declaration of the loop here. And then we have an open brace again. And the closed brace is down below where the loop closes. So this variable I just lives right in there. If I try to use I somewhere else, it's going to complain and it doesn't know what I is. I here, we're going to use generally I for like indexing. So I, J, K, those are good letters to use for indexing. We'll get into more of that later. So we'll run it, make sure it works. It does, yay. And we kind of, we suspected it would work, so we didn't get any syntax errors. So notice, the syntax is a little different here than what you're probably used to, but that's just what happens when you change a language. The structure of the loop is the same. It starts off with I equaling 1, and it runs through the loop. So there it runs through the loop, does everything inside what's called the body of the loop. Then it comes back up, I increases here by 1. And it checks, is I less than or equal to 1? Yes, I is now 1, so it's equal to 1. It runs again. Then that's the body of the loop. Then it goes back up and increases I by 1. I is now 2. It says, is I less than or equal to 1? No. So it returns control, in this case, to the end of this function, which then goes back to whoever called it, which was originally here, draw 2 lines, and then draw X. Okay, so now I have one more loop here in 3 stars. And now we're going to say for open parenthesis. Again, I'm going to go integer I, because even though I used I already, it was a different place. And again, I'm just using this temporarily. This I is only going to be valid inside this loop. And then once we leave that loop, the I goes away. So for integer I equals 0, I is less than or equal to, we'd like to say 3, but that would print 0, 1, 2, 3, 0, 1, 2, 3. That's 4 lines of code. Many people will want to start at 1, and that's fine. You can go 1 to 3. Here we go less than or equal to, or 0, 1, 2. I mean, I don't know. Java will start counting at 0. So similar to Python does the same thing. We start counting at 0 generally in computer science, and then I++. And then we need to open the loop with an open brace, and I'll hit return to sort of close the loop. So notice now the loop now is doing nothing. If I run this, I'm going to get the same output that I got before because there's nothing actually printing inside this loop. Let's just test something. Let's print something else inside this loop. System dot let's just see where this function gets called. Run it. Or I could put the word test in there, right? Test, and that's going to see where that loop's happening. So when I look at my console, it doesn't happen until it gets to here. It runs that loop 3 times, then prints John 3 times, and then it's printing the 3 stars after it. So obviously that's not what we want to do. We don't want this line of code. We want one of these in there. And then we'll run it. And we'll see that it prints what I want it to print. So, is this better than what we had? Yes. Is it shorter than what we had? I mean, this loop is printing 2 lines, but look at it, it's actually 3 lines of code. So it's actually a little bit longer right there, but the idea that it's doing the same thing twice, we'd rather capture that in a loop, especially if we're going to do it more than twice. So for example, down here, we're this is 3 lines of code. Again, replacing 3 lines of code, but now it's sort of, I mean, this, I don't know, you can't really count this closed brace as a line of code. It's just a closed brace. So really, it's just a loop that runs 3 times. And so, I mean, it really is, it does reduce redundancy. We don't have the same line of code repeated 3 times. We have that line of code occurring in a loop that runs 3 times. I just want to show you this can also go from 1 to 3. I starts at 1, it goes to 2, and then 3, and that's going to run 3 times. Run it. And I get my 3 stars here. So I'll change it. You know, I could also do this. I could start at 0 and go up till it's less than 3. To me, that's a little more deceptive because it's like, okay, it's going to run when I is 0, and then 1, and then 2, and then not when it runs at 3. So it runs 3 times. So it's kind of a way of getting around like starting at 0. So I think it makes more sense to make that less than or equal to and make that a 2. 0, 1, 2. Okay, run it, and then we're going to call it for this video. I'll try to show the code once more. Again, at any point during these videos, you can speed up or slow down as you feel the need. Jump ahead, pause. All those things are good things to get comfortable with. Remember, back when we did the first one, we actually didn't start in Eclipse. We started on paper, trying to figure out how to deconstruct this figure first into top, middle, and bottom. And then as we started coding, we realized, oh, you know, the middle actually has some of the same components as the top. So we went from there, but the work, the logic is happening on paper. The syntax and the coding, the implementation is happening on the computer.